Okay, in today's video, I want to talk a little bit about stress and anxiety. So, a lot of people, especially after the election in the US, and it's kind of intensified a little bit, after the presidential change here in the U.S. But a lot of people are experiencing more stress and anxiety in their life. They just feel like, "Oh, I'm kind of freaking out. Things are going so fast. I don't know what's going on." And some people are experiencing that at work. Some people are experiencing that in their personal life. And so today I want to talk a little bit about how to help manage some of that stress and anxiety in teams and with you. Okay. Now, I'm going to first start talking about you because I want to talk about you today. I don't want to talk about me, but I'll still probably talk a little bit about me because I'll share some practical tips and some things that I do, some things that I encourage people that I coach to do to help reduce that stress and anxiety level that you may be feeling. Okay, now, first off, I want to approach an elephant in the room. Hello, elephant. How are you, pink elephant? Okay, that sometimes we don't want to admit that we're feeling the stress and anxiety ourselves. Okay, it's easy to think this is just somebody else. We never want to necessarily admit it to ourselves, and that's okay. I understand why people do that because we think, well, I'm strong. I don't have to give in to that. It's not really affecting me, and we end up kind of lying to ourselves. And anytime that we lie to ourselves, that's a blind spot. It's something that we can't see. It's something that we're choosing to ignore. It's us being the ostrich and just putting our head in the sand. Now, eventually that will catch up with us. Okay. And in reality, when we choose to ignore things that are true, things that are going on with us, we lose some of our authenticity as well because we're trying to put on a mask. We're trying to pretend that everything is okay when inside we're crumbling, we're hurting, we're feeling that stress and anxiety. Okay, so I want to address that first because recently I was on a audit leader forum call with a bunch of executives, and I brought this topic up. I said, a lot of people are feeling some of the stress on this. Let's talk about it. And the room went quiet, right? And this is a group that normally we talk about a lot of stuff very openly, very candidly, but nobody really wanted to talk about how it was affecting themselves. So I provided some tips anyway, because again, I know that sometimes when we feel a little uncomfortable about certain topics, we don't want to talk about it. So I'm here talking about it today, and you can take it or leave it. You don't have to admit to me or admit to somebody else if this is affecting you. But I want to start off the video talking about you and then end with talking about how to deal with this on teams. Because a lot of the things that I'm talking about for you will also relate to the teams. And one thing that I know from leadership is leaders are a mirror to their team. And so, what that means is the way you're acting, people on your team will mirror that back to you. And so, chances are, if you have people on your team who are feeling this stress and anxiety, right, some of it again can be coming from them, but a lot of times they're mirroring back what they're feeling or sensing in you. And so often, as leaders, we have these blind spots. We don't realize that we're actually, showing our emotions when we really are. Okay. So let's go through and talk about this a little bit because I know, especially in today's age with technology, literally within nanoseconds, people all over the world can know what's going on. There's pictures, there's videos, there's social media, there's multiple news sources that are out there all the time. barraging us with a lot of information. Now, the first thing that I want you to realize is everything you read is not true. I'm going to say that again. Everything you read is not true, even when it seems like it's coming from a credible source. So I will give you an example. A friend of mine, and again, I think that she very validly believed this. The sources that she was relying on for her information were those that she trusted. And she told me, she said, "Yeah, Elon Musk is spending his own money to do Super Bowl ads." And I thought, okay. And she's like, "Yeah, he's going to expose a lot of the stuff that they're finding now in the federal government, and he's paying for it out of his own pocket so that people in America can know and can hear it straight from him." And I thought, well, that kind of sounds a little bit like something that Elon Musk would do, but that's kind of interesting. Okay, I didn't put too much in it, but then as I was watching the Super Bowl, I kept thinking, it'd be interesting to see one of these commercials. I never saw one of the commercials, which means that, again, whatever source she got this information from, it wasn't true. I didn't see any Elon Musk ads in the Super Bowl when I was watching it, and that's okay, right? But it's an example of how, again, don't believe everything you read, okay? Even if it seems like it comes from a credible news source. Realize that a lot of times a story is being told, and that is not what is actually happening. And I've had many experiences of that in my life growing up, of literally being in meetings or in places where certain things were reported on by the news, and kind of scratching my head and thinking, well, that wasn't the meeting I was in, because it was totally different. Okay, so that's one of the first things to think about is, just because you read something on social media, you read it in a news source, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So there's no reason for you to start getting worked up, to feel stress or anxiety about something that, in all honesty, may not even be true at all. Okay. A lot of times we get ourselves into anxiety because we are worried about things that may happen in the future. But those are things that have not happened, and they may never happen. And so that's why, another point is always try to be in the present moment as much as we can in the present moment, because that's all that we actually are observing. That's all that we can actually control, right? And so the more we're in the present moment, the less anxiety and stress we actually have, because we're not worried about something that may or may not actually happen. Okay. Another point for you to think about is that I have been taught, and I'm learning this, I'm getting into it, but it's the idea of it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with you. If it's something that has nothing to do with you, you don't need to be concerned about it. And I'll give you a couple of real life examples here. Okay. There are wars and things going on all over the world, right? For one of the biggest ones, we've got issues over in the Ukraine and Russia. We've got issues, in Israel, Palestine. And while it may be interesting to hear what's going on, and we feel like that we need to be good citizens, of the world, of knowing what's going on, those things probably have nothing to do with you. They have nothing to do with you. And I'll give you an example, right? They have nothing to do with me. Those wars and calamities, even, for example, the fires, that ravaged through Los Angeles, they have nothing to do with me. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that I don't have empathy. It doesn't mean that I don't care, but those things have nothing to do with my present moment. I don't live in Los Angeles anymore. I don't live in the Ukraine or Russia. I don't live in Israel or Palestine. And so because of that, those things don't have a direct impact on me. So it has nothing to do with me in my present state, right? And so that's one thing to always keep in mind. Now, I will share this, right? Even though it does not affect me personally, does it affect people that I know? Yes. I have a family member who lives in Belarus. I have, that person has family members that live in the Ukraine. Does it affect them? Yes, right? It's going to affect them more directly, but it doesn't directly affect me. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't have empathy. It doesn't mean that I don't read the news, but I do it a little bit different. Okay. And I'm going to explain to you how you can, what I call not getting wet when something comes up. So I read the news. I read news, uh, uh, usually the Wall Street Journal and the Economist, because I'm more interested from a business perspective. But I will read the news, but I don't attach to it. I don't put my own emotions on it. So when I'm reading things about maybe one of these conflicts that is going on in the world, I'm just interested in observing what is going on, but I'm not allowing my emotions to get trapped up in it, thinking, "Oh, that side of the conflict is the bad guys, and these are the good guys, and I need to be fighting for the good guys." No, I'm not thinking about that, right? I'm just observing what's going on. Now, I'm sending love to people who are, maybe in those situations. My family member that lives in Belarus, I send her love. I think about her. I think about all the people who are negatively impacted by conflict zones. I send them love. But again, it has nothing to do with me. I don't have to feel the stress and anxiety that they do, but I can feel grateful that I live in a peaceful place. I can send love to them and comfort to them, right? But it has nothing to do with me. Okay. So that's another way to reduce your stress and anxiety. I don't need to be worried about getting bombed where I live, right? Even though people over there may, it has something to do with them. It has nothing to do with me. Okay. Now, another way to reduce stress and anxiety is placing boundaries. Okay. Now, that sounds simple, right? But let me talk about some of the real life boundaries that you may or may not actually be having in your life. So I told you before, in today's technologically infused life, we have access to information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on our phones and on our computers. Now, what happens is a lot of people go through the day like this. They wake up in the morning, the first thing they do is grab their phone. And they grab their phone to look and see what emails came in overnight, maybe what news has happened during the day, and they start immersing themselves almost immediately in a lot of these things that are going on in the world. They don't have a morning boundary, right? Throughout the day, they're constantly checking their email, they're constantly checking their Slack or Messenger things, that may come in, sometimes because of a fear of missing out, right? But it feels like when we do that, that we're always on, that we are always on, just like the technology. And when you do that, you start to go a little crazy because it feels like stuff is happening all the time. But in your present moment, is it really? And the answer is no, right? So we can set boundaries. We can set boundaries on our technology use. So, for example, I'm only going to spend 10 minutes on social media, let's say, and I'm going to do that at this time of day. Maybe I'm only going to check my email 2 or 3 times a day, right? So the more you set boundaries, right, the less you feel all of this anxiousness and anxiety going on in your life because like, oh my gosh, am I going to miss an email? What's going to happen? Oh, and then I'm worried about, this email and how I responded, and oh my gosh, did I respond the right way? And what are they really going to think, right? All of those things go through our mind, and all of those things increase our anxiety. Okay. Now, for a long time, I have set boundaries when it comes to technology. If you'll notice, I post on social media some, but I go out, I do what I need to do, and I get off as quick as I can. So today, for example, I'm here recording a video, but I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time checking out each of the comments. Sometimes I do. I spend a certain amount of time each day looking at comments, responding to people, but I don't feel the need to immediately respond if somebody comments, right? Because I have to set healthy boundaries for myself. For a long time, I only check emails usually a few times a day. Why do I do that? Because I got stuff I got to get done, right? Like right now, I am recording a video and I'm talking to you. Well, what if I'm talking to you and I'm over here checking my email at the same time, right? That wouldn't be me being in the present moment and being presently with you, right? And it would be distracting me from what I'm doing. So I'm going to spend probably 30-ish minutes doing this video, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing, right? But I'm setting boundaries. When people call me, right, I don't feel the need to pick up. When somebody calls you, that's an invitation for you to pick up. If I'm talking to somebody else, if I'm in the middle of something else, I don't pick up the phone. I get back to them when it suits me, right? When I'm done doing whatever else I need to do. I'm setting those boundaries, and you can set boundaries as well. Now, I realize that, especially in the job world, a lot of people now expect you to be on 24/7. I have literally heard people who who act like this, and you may know somebody who is like this. Somebody sends you an email. 5 minutes later, they send you a text. 5 minutes after that, they call you, and you pick up the phone, and the first thing they say is, "Did you get my text? Did you get my email?" Well, that was 5 minutes ago, right? Nothing requires an immediate response. In fact, I have found often that if I ignore a lot of things like that, they tend to work themselves out. So I used to have kind of a rule when I was in the corporate world, and I still kind of do it now, is if certain emails come in, I may read it, but I don't respond. I have a boundary that I don't respond until the next day, or I wait for a certain number of hours. Maybe I think about it before I end up responding. It's a boundary that I set. So if you send me an email, I'm not going to respond immediately. But if I feel like I need to respond within 1 or 2 days, I will probably respond to you, right? But that's because I'm setting boundaries to manage the stress and anxiety in my life, right? And so again, I know that there are some unrealistic expectations of being online 24/7 because again, I have heard stories about people who are, they're at their computer, they're working, somebody on the team sends them, like a Slack or instant message asking them a question, or somebody can see that you're online and so they send you a message and you don't respond within 5 or 10 minutes. Well, because you got up from your desk, right? So the computer still thinks you're sitting there, and you go to the toilet, because as humans, we all need to go to the toilet. In fact, when I get done with this video, I'm probably going to go use the toilet, right? Now, is it unreasonable for somebody to expect an immediate response when maybe you're taking care of something biological? Maybe you're talking to somebody else. Maybe you're working on something else and you don't want to be distracted. right? Because the more that we move our attention back and forth between different things, the less productive we actually are as well, right? And so that's setting some boundaries. The next thing that I want to give you as a tip is what I call moving your attention. Now, it may seem a little, crazy based on what I just said, but let me explain what that means. Is if you're starting to feel stressed, if you're starting to feel anxious, move your attention away from that. Move it away from that. Now, you can do it many different ways. One example that I share with people is what I call the 10 things. Okay, and this is often used in therapy and other places like that, where if you get somebody, in a therapy session or a coaching session, and all of a sudden they just start really freaking out. Sometimes the therapist will stop them and say, okay, 10 things, right? And what that means is that the person has to look around the room and mention 10 things, uh, uh, thermometer, microphone, water bottle, coffee mug, right? And by the time you get to the end of the 10, often you have moved your attention away from what was stressing you out. Okay. And so you can do the same thing in your life. If you read an article and it just gets you pissed off and you feel like, oh my gosh, the injustices in the world, and your monkey mind is starting to go, 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 go. As soon as you become aware of it, time out, 10 things. Look around you and actually say 10 things that you see. Breathe and see if you can let it go, right? If you can't, do 10 more. If you still can't, do 10 more. If you still can't, get up and walk around, even if it's for, 10 seconds, and come and sit back down. A lot of times that will help you to kind of reprogram what was going on and be a pattern interrupt into what you were ruminating over. Okay. Another way to reduce that stress and anxiety is just to breathe. Just breathe. Okay. If you need to, plug your ears so you can't hear anything, close your eyes, and just breathe, even for 90 seconds. Just slow breaths will help to reduce your stress and anxiety in what you may be feeling. Okay. So those are kind of some practical tips, for you to think about if you're having some of this stress and anxiety in your life, right? Does it have anything to do with you, really? Does it have anything to do with your present moment, present situation? Can you set boundaries? And boundaries are easy enough to set. They're harder to keep, right? Because what happens is, when people are like, well, how come you didn't respond to my instant message? I know your computer says you were at your desk. Well, you actually have to tell them, hey, I was in the bathroom. I'll get back to you when I can. I was on a call with a client. As soon as I finished that call, I went and responded to you, right? And so you have to enforce those boundaries with other people. Some people are unrealistic. That's okay, right? But you have to set boundaries and you have to do what's right for you. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit because, like I said, there's a lot of people on your team. Even if you may not be dealing with these things, people on your team are probably feeling stressed or anxious. Again, in 2025, after the presidential change, how many discussions about politics have probably come up in the work, have come up in your personal life, of people complaining about this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and other people thinking, oh my God, the world just ended, right? And because there's people that are polarized on either side, but a lot of people are talking about it, and a lot of people are freaking out, right? So, as a leader, what can you do to help your team if they're feeling stress and anxiety? Well, part of it's going to depend on what's causing that stress and anxiety, but I'll give you some general rules of thumb. The first one is just acknowledge other people, acknowledge them. So if for whatever it happens to be, right, is just acknowledge them. You don't have to agree with them, right? Somebody may come in and say Trump is the biggest blah 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 blah. I can't believe blah 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 blah, right? Or somebody may come in and say Trump is the greatest ever blah 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 blah, right? You don't have to agree with the person. You just need to listen, right? Just listen. I mean, it's a basic human skill that I think a lot of times as leaders we forget. Just listen. And especially if it's something that maybe they're opening up to you a little bit about, hey, I have family that lives in Israel, or I have family that lives in the Ukraine, whatever, right? You just listen and then acknowledge them. And you can say something simple like, I understand, or I understand that must be hard for you, right? By saying that, I'm not agreeing with them. I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm not trying to tell them that no, I believe something else and you're completely wrong, because that just escalates it for both people. But I'm just acknowledging what they're feeling, because that's one of the main things that humans want. They want to be heard and they want to be understood. And so by saying something like, I understand, or I understand that must be hard for you, right, is a big step in that way. And you will notice if you start doing that, people will relax. You'll physically be able to even see them kind of relax, because they're feeling like they're in a fight. Like you're going to tell them that they're wrong and they have to fight with you, and that just creates more stress and anxiety for both people, right? So learn to acknowledge other people. Don't have to agree, right? And if, again, maybe it's a work performance issue, but it's important to understand maybe why there's an issue going on, right? Because you seek first to understand and then to be understood. If you go back to Stephen Covey, that was from the 80s, okay? In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, okay? What else can you do as a leader? Well, one thing you can do is to allow boundaries. Don't be the boss who is asking your employee where they were and why they didn't respond to you within 2 minutes, right? And again, I know that there may be kind of some customary, business rules in your company or other things. If everybody's supposed to respond, let's say, to an email within 24 hours, that may be kind of an unwritten or written rule in your organization. I understand that, right? But give people a little credit. Treat people the way you would like to be treated. If you don't like somebody doing that to you, don't do it to somebody on your team. Find a different way to do it, right? And allow them to have their boundaries. Now, each of us is going to have different boundaries as well, and that's okay too, right? If let's say, again, someone on your team has small children, they need to come into work a little bit late, maybe because they have to drop kids off at school, they have to pick them up after school, maybe there's different things like that that are going on. And so you've got to kind of come to an agreement and learn, what are their boundaries? What boundaries would make them happy? Person that worked for me for a long time, night owl, right? Would go to bed late, would get up late. And so for a lot of the day, I was not awake when he was awake. Okay. But we learned how to deal with the boundaries, right? What worked for him, what worked for me. We found a common ground in between. And so you can do that as well with your people. Allow them to have the boundaries that make sense. Obviously, you don't want people being completely unreasonable, because work still has to get done. But there's usually a lot of flexibility. And I think, again, from a leadership perspective, this is one area where leadership is different than management. And a lot of times in management, you're trying to control people. You're trying to make everybody the same, make everybody do exactly the same things. But that's kind of an old school way of doing it. Let's understand and see each other as human beings and actually lead instead of trying to control them. Like I said, if you have somebody who needs to drop off kids at school in the morning, but your team gets to work at 8 and leaves at 5, well, that may be unrealistic for the person. What if they got in at 9 and left at 6 instead, right? Or maybe they get in at 9 and they leave at 3 and pick up their kids and they work from home another couple of hours at night, right? Learn to be flexible, learn to see people as human beings, and start allowing people to be who they are, right? If you've got kids, if you've got elderly parents, if you're a person who just is not a morning person, right, then you need to know that, to understand that, and then be able to start working. Allow some sort of, I don't want to say compromise, but some sort of collaboration between the people so that you can actually get the work done that you need to. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up today. Told you I was going to go about 30 minutes, and I'm going to keep to that boundary, which is about where we're at right now. And but go back, watch this again if you need to. But I have found in my life, the more that I have actually followed these things that I'm telling you, because again, I'm not telling you something because I read it in a book. I'm telling you because I've been doing this for years in my life and it's worked for me. I've been sharing these things with people that I coach for years, and people have been doing them and they have been seeing, right, a reduction in stress and anxiety. So believe me, don't believe me, it's up to you. But the fact that you're still listening to this means there was something today that I said that made sense to you. So just do one thing, right? Can't do everything that I probably just talked about, but just pick one thing, whatever that one thing happens to be, and start doing it. Start practicing it today, start practicing it tomorrow, whatever. But as you start implementing it, as you start getting good at it, then maybe implement another one, and then another one, and then another one, right? But take it one step at a time. So, with that, I'm going to sign off and hope that you have a blessed rest of your day. And I'll see you on the next video.